London Racer 2 was developed and published by PSX Games in 2002. That would appear on the PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2 and even with the Windows PC. Now there are varying differences depending on the format that you play the game on. And while this is a later game on the PlayStation's lifespan, it is more of a budget entry. So anyone looking for realistic physics that are similar to Gran Turismo, you won't get that here. If anything, when we look at it compared to a lot of other racing games that had been released even before it, the game is very subpar at best, especially on the PlayStation. Now it's playable, and for all intents and purposes, if you put a bit of time into it, it is enjoyable, but it also can be very frustrating. Now it does take you through many different locations around the streets of London, and later on in the game, the further into it that you get, you will end up racing across over in America, where you'll be racing through stages in Las Vegas, and you have different gameplay modes that you'll need to play through in order to unlock everything that the game has to offer. But even with the modes that are available, you will find yourself replaying the same stages over and over again in order to achieve those results. So in most regards, and in many cases, the game will get repetitive very quickly. Coupled with that, the handling physics of the game aren't overly good. It takes a bit of getting used to, but the unbalanced AI physics of your opponents leaves a lot of questions, as they can catch up with you, especially in the early stages of the game. Until you've really upgraded your car, it's very, very hard to win races because they can literally just pass you whenever it suits them. But you will have to put a bit of time into it to allow yourself any sort of leeway with regards to ease of use. Now the game itself, it won't appeal to more serious racers out there, but it will appeal to a more younger audience or casual gamers that don't really care for it as much, that just want something to pick up and play in short bursts. The one thing to note is that as you're driving around, you do have access to listen to music through the use of likes of radio stations, where you have like a radio DJ talking to people at different intervals and listening to different types of music. And while the soundtrack itself is good, it doesn't play enough of the soundtrack for it to be memorable. But not only that, it repeats the same credits and dialogue pretty much over and over again, so that also adds to the repetitive nature of the game.
What is it with the clubs up here in Edinburgh?
The taxis? It's a good question. But why are you asking?
Well, because I've tried to flag one down before and he went right back at about 90 miles an hour.
Get back to the show.
What's your complaint?
I was going to cross the road outside Bristol and a man ran a red light. He jumped back onto the curb. He was playing your show really loud. He had his eyes closed and he was waving the...
Sorry, Sebastian. It's not Buckingham Palace. You don't get the tickets, but I'll play your little shock end now to make her up.
All in all, if you sit down and play the game, it will take you roughly over an hour to finish up everything. Now that's all dependent on skill and luck. If you're able to win races, handy enough. And once you upgrade your cars, pretty much it's a cakewalk after that. But again, it does come down to skill. Graphically, especially on the PS1, compared to other versions, if anything, like for even though it's a budget game, graphically it's very low quality. There's a lot better and visually better games out there on the console. But graphics aside, yeah, it is a budget game. You're not really going to see anything really that's going to break new grounds here. Now it's not bad. I sat down and I played it, and in fairness now, when I got into it, I found myself wanting to finish the game and at least just trying to achieve everything which I managed to do. The one thing I will admit that really drove me mad is the wallowiness of the controls. It's all over the place on the cars. When you turn, it's very, very sensitive or oversensitive, and it's just, you're constantly fighting. Like the car will never stay in a straight line. If you try to maneuver the car, you're just fighting with it the whole time, and you'll find that throughout the course of every track that you race on, and it's the same across any car that you use. Now there is different handling physics regarding of each vehicle that you choose, but aside from that, it's just frustrating. It's just not well balanced at all. And if you've ever played any of the PS2 versions, like when you look at the London Racer series and the PS2, even USA Racer, they have a similar kind of outlay. Now they are better suited and they are tweaked a little bit better, but they're still not like considered good games, especially when you compare them to more heavy hitters. But then I suppose they're never really marketing towards that aspect. They're never really going to compare to those games at all. It is what it is. What you see is what you get, and that's as simple as that. Now, in saying that, back then, if you had paid like 30 or 40 quid for this game, you'd be, well, annoyed, let's just put it that way. But it would have suited if you got it for maybe like a 5 or a 10 in a bargain bin somewhere. You could have picked it up fairly cheaply, and you probably would have got some enjoyment out of it for that. Regardless, for me personally, right, it's not the worst game I've played on the PlayStation. It's not the worst racing game either. There are better titles out there, but it's one of those games that, yeah, even though the repetitiveness and the clunky controls, but it's like anything else. If you stick with it, you will get some enjoyment out of it, but that's only if you have the patience to do that. Not everybody will, but some might. Some might, like myself, glutton for punishment, as they say, but it is what it is. I still want to explore a lot of these games. I know a lot of them aren't all that great. I'm just going to be honest about that. But they offered something to different people, and in all honesty, a lot of these games represent many of our childhoods. Not everybody had access to all the mainstream games, and even for younger players growing up of that generation, this would have been the type of game that they would have played and probably have the most memories on. So to say that it's totally bad isn't always the case, because it did appeal to some. With that being said though, I would love to know your thoughts of this if you played it at all. Were you a fan of this game, or even the PlayStation 2 edition back in the day? And if so, what did you think of this series of games? Did you like them, or did you hate them? Whatever stories you do have of the game, I'd love to hear them, so be sure to share them down in the comments below. And if you would like to see more content around other unusual and quirky, even budget style racers like this that I've already covered on the channel that were also released on the PlayStation, then you can check out this playlist here on the screen to see more of those games in action. And as always, keep those gaming memories alive.